All right, so today we're going to go over part two of the branding that we went over last week. So this one is more so about powerful branding and methods, pro tips to developing a winning logo. So I'm going to scroll down and go over the call of action items. So today we're going to go over selecting colors, selecting fonts, developing icons, sketching out ideas, developing taglines, and laying out the brand elements. And we got a couple extra bonus tips. So the first one I'm going to go over is selecting the color. So with selecting the color, it's essentially you just got to understand color theory and color methodology. And the easiest way to do that is I've broken down all the definitions of all the variables right here. So like, a triad, a complementary color, double split complementary color, all of this sounds completely like what the hell is SA talking about? But these are all real things. And visually, once you kind of see how they work with each other, it'll make really, really good sense. So this visual is a representation of the software that's on here. This link is color dot, and actually I could just go live since it's just us today. So once this platform loads, and I always recommend using Adobe because Adobe is they've been using Pantone, CMYK, RGB forever. So if you're looking for colors, I ideally going to this environment, and you kind of see this is very like intuitive, right? If I decide to change this color, I'm adjusting the color on the left, I'm adjusting it on whatever, automatically it's going to adjust the 5 colors that are all harmonized colors for this type of color palette. So if I'm talking about a triad is usually a 3-part color system. As you can see, it just picks essentially 3 colors within variables. So if I make this red, then the other ones would probably be like the teal and the green. So these would be the 3 colors that I would use to create something with synergy, or maybe I'll use the blue, the yellow, and the pink. So this is a really good platform to mix and match and play in. So if your color dominant is pink, what other 4 colors can go with that? What's your secondary colors? What's your headline colors? What's, accent colors? This is how you figure out those accent colors without having to think about it. It's just done for you 100% completely, right? And so that's the first part of figuring out what your colors are. And each one of these are defined for you in this document. Secondary to that is going into the extract mode. So this is kind of pulling off the logo that we talked about last week, which is the WizPub. And so I sampled this logo in, and once you pull the logo in, what it's going to do, let's say you have an image of a product, let's say you have a physical product, it has a label on it. Let's say you have anything that has color on it, which everything does. You could take a picture of it and you could upload it to the Adobe color wheel. And then what it's going to do is going to source those colors for you. It's going to actually pinpoint the primary colors from that image for you. Once that is done, then you have an opportunity to mix and match. Do you want to be more colorful? Do you want it to be bright? Do you want it to be muted? Do you want it to be deep? Do you want it to be dark? And then you can kind of mix and match these to figure out your color palette. Then once you find your color palette this way, then you could sample maybe this blue and go back to this and put that blue in and then say, hey, I want this to be a triad. And then it's going to figure out the other 4 colors for you. So everything that I'm going to show you guys today, like as far as branding and colors and laying out and fonts, is 100% systematic. Now on the front end, it looks very creative because it is going to be creative, but on the back end, there's systems in place to make things done. So that way you don't have to overthink or overprocess these steps. All right, so let's go down to step 8, like finding fonts. So fonts is one of these things that, again, it does not have to be overly complex. Keeping fonts simple in today's world, unlike back in the 80s and 90s, trying to find fonts or purchasing fonts or even hand drawing fonts are kind of a thing of the past. So in today's world, ideally, you can use Google Fonts. Google Fonts is a great platform because it's universal. It works on PC, it works on Mac, it works on mobile, and it's also in the cloud. So if I go to another computer, if I go to a printer, I could easily just give them the link to the Google Cloud font, and they'll be able to download it and utilize that font right then and there. The beautiful aspect of Google Fonts is that it'll visually show you a representation. And looking at my screen right now, I put in WizPub and it gives me all the different fonts that Google has, and I can kind of visually see what does this font really look like utilizing the typography for the brand or for the logo. So just understanding that there's different factors to fonts, right? You want brand recognition, right? You want to keep the font very legible. It has to be very clean. When you're picking a font family, and I'll show you what that looks like. Font families are something that you need to be very aware of. So Google does it in the sense, you see this says 12 styles, and this one says 6 styles, this one says 10 styles. Ideally, at the bare minimum, you want something with 4 or more styles. And the reason for that, and I'll show you what that looks like, is you may have a single font that can do multiple things for you. If I want a really bold font, I want to make sure it has a bold font. So this could be the logo font. This can be the Wiz Pub, but then my subtitle or my headline copy could easily be the regular font or the light font. So you want something that has all the variations in it. That way you don't have to find multiple fonts, because the worst thing that you ever want to do when you're selecting fonts is pick 2 of the same fonts. Not to say the same name, but 2 fonts that look closely the same, but they're not exactly the same. Later on, you can kind of fall into issues because the ampersands may be different, the at signs may be different, the A's may be different, the counters may be different. So finding a font with multiple levels of styles is ideal. And again, Google does it for you right away. Let me go back to this. So the difference between a sans serif and a serif font, and that's another major thing. Obviously, there's display fonts, there's handwriting fonts, and ideally, when you're talking about logos, 9 out of 10 times you're talking about either a sans serif or a serif font. The differences between the two is very simple: Arial and Times Roman, right? If you could look at these 2 fonts, they're very transparent that Times Roman is a serif font. Serif meaning that it has those little tips and those little edges. Sans serif meaning that it's a plain simple font like Arial is. So you just have to think, what is my user looking for? Usually copy in a book would probably be serif, and sans serif would probably be usually the titles, headlines, or the title of a book, something along those lines. So you want to think about this before you even dive into selecting a font. Kind of like, do you want to utilize the serif as something in your icon, or do you want something that's really big and bold and sharp and clean like a sans serif? All right, we're going to go down to developing the icons. So with developing the icons, this is pretty much done for you already, right? I mean, you created those 20 words in step 1, right? We went through and was like, okay, think of 20 words that represent you, represent your brand, and write a list. Well, then you could take these 20 words and run them through Google image search. You could run them to competitor logos, right? You can kind of say, okay, if I'm an online store, Amazon or Walmart, and I'm trying to see what those logos look like. So you could easily search and collect those images. Secondary to that, for general icons, you can go to FreePix, Vector Groove, Vecteezy, PicBay, and go to Vectors, Yaya Images, and InStock Photo, iStock Photo. These are all, some of them all have free variables to them. Some of them are free until you actually want to download. Some of them are free to download. But the idea here is like, okay, now I know my words, right? And then we took care of that in the first branding. I kind of know what my colors are. I kind of know a little bit about what my brand and what I want to do. I kind of know what my clients are. So like, what image would I use to represent this brand? So you would take this, and for example, one of the keywords for the brand that we're working on is WizPub was RSS feeds. So obviously RSS feeds is a known thing. So I would put RSS feed in Vecteezy. It came up with all these different variations of RSS feeds. So for me, I'm just visually thinking, okay, this one is clean and simple. This one kind of has like a 3D look and feel to it. How can I use these, right? So again, I'm circling these to say, okay, I want to download these 2 to kind of integrate them into my brand, but I want to have them in my back pocket as a resource. As we scroll down, then we're going to get into sketching. So again, we're still on the RSS feed side of things, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find images that I'm looking for. So this one was matchmaker.com. This P is from Microsoft PowerPoint. This is the RSS feed from the icon that I downloaded. I've also remembered in my memory, like the question mark, that's kind of a P from the original Powerade ads and the original Powerade icon, and then just a question mark. So taking these conceptual items and trying to create like a W and a P, right? So visually on the right, this is just a rough sketch that I created. The RSS feed is the dot with the 2 lines, and then the other side could have been an RSS feed as well, but I was like, how do I connect that? So I'm looking at this P. So I made the loop around and connected it. So now it's, you can see the W and you can see the P, and it's starting to form visually the representation of an icon that not only stands for the brand of being an RSS syndication, but it also has these interwoven things going on with it as well, which kind of goes into the publication side of things. Right. So like, and then if you look at it from a symbolism standpoint, you can also see the Powerade question mark. So this loops around and there's a dot at the end, and that kind of gives you like the question mark. and I'm trying to pull all these things together. So that's stage one. Like, this is my rough sketch of a visual that I'm looking for, and I can see what it looks like visually in my head, and I'm just trying to create these elements into one central image. Then going into, I usually, like, at this point in time, I'll usually take a break, and then I just go into like developing like the taglines. So the taglines are, they need to be short, right? They need to be able to tell a story. They need to be able to outline your offering. They need to be able to communicate with clarity. They need to describe the benefits of your product and services. And you also need to be able to do a double take, kind of like what you kept saying before, like my O face. Like, if that was essentially my tagline for a brand, then somebody would be like, what's an O face, right? So you kind of have to have that double take factor as well. So looking at the results of what I've taking these keywords and I'm running them through software. Now, you can build them on your own. You could write all the variables and then do usability testing to say, okay, which one of these do you like? Or you can use software in today's world that has AI. Then I can say, hey, I like these particular words, and I want you to kind of create multiple different taglines. And then from those taglines, you can kind of Frankenstein and create something that you're looking for. So the platform that I use for that is called Copysmith. And I think I may have an image of, yep. So Copysmith, literally, I just put in the company's name, a general description, and then what it did, it created like 15 to 20 different taglines for me. So these are like 11 of those taglines. Publish smart, smart publishing made easy. It's better than a magic 8-ball. Run your business like a wizard. So you can kind of see some of these keywords start coming back up from the original 20 words without me having to tell the system that these are the words that I'm looking for. The friendly dashboard for authors and podcasters, turn your RSS feed into a publishing powerhouse. So like, I could literally use any one of these as taglines, or I could then use these for later on for headlines, for copy, for advertising spots, for call of actions, because they all have their value. It's just figuring out which one am I going to use for the tagline for the logo, but it's not to say I'm going to discredit any of these other taglines. So going through this process, you're going to end up building not only a brand, but you're going to start building brand copy to associate with that brand and have the functionality described for you, very like less than 10 words for each one of these statements. Then we're going to go into laying out the brand elements. So we have the colors, we have the font, we have icons, we have sketches, we have the tagline. So like, what do all these elements like when they come to fruition? Because right now we're 100% concept. Like, nothing is a finished, polished logo at this point, or a brand at this point. So the first thing you want to think about is symmetry. Like, you got to have like the side of thinking about balance. It doesn't have to be equal on all sides, but you have to think, okay, my color, is my color balance? Do I have a complementary color? Is it orange and blue? Is it black and white, right? Then the balance of the shapes is another thing as well. Think of them as primary shapes, right? Is it a square, a circle, a triangle? Is it a circle on top of a square? Is it a triangle underneath a circle? Is it a rectangle on top of a square? And make sure that if you're looking at it from the box standpoint, does that work? Versus if you have a triangle and it's leaning off the side of a circle, then visually that doesn't work. So you have to kind of take it down to the primary root of these shapes to make sure the fundamentals of those shapes work first, and then build off of that. Showing depth, you could show depth of field. You could also do layering. You could make icons that go into the z-axis. You could also do shadowing as well. The iconic geometry is what I just went over. It's like, it's a circle, square, and triangle, and then make sure you find the balance. The duality of it is kind of going back to the symmetry of it. Like, does it work visually? Does it also portray logically? Does it also talk to my customer? Does it also look sexy? Kind of like the yin and yang, or the push and pull, or up and down. You have to find the symmetry within this icon. The Easter eggs, and I'm going to show you visually what this logo turned out to look like. So from start to finish, all the elements that we described, this is like the final logo, and the taglines there, the colors are there. So when I'm talking about the Easter eggs, a lot of times you'll see FedEx. FedEx has a hidden Easter egg where the X goes into the F, and it makes into a triangle. I'm sorry, it becomes an arrow. So a lot of times you'll see stuff like that, like the Wendy's logo. You may not realize it, but the Wendy's logo underneath her, like her apron right above it, it spells out mom. So these little details that creative people kind of infuse in their branding, so that way it becomes more of a story. So this one, you could obviously see the RSS feed. You could definitely see the P. The question mark is one of those things that's there, but is not there as well too. And then like, what's the hidden thing behind it? Well, you could look at it as two different people, right? The Wiz is a head on top of an eye, much like I did with Boss Uncaged. And this could be like, you can be someone underneath that person as well, or it can be magnetic, right? And I'm talking about creating content, magnet leads, all these different things that go into the definition of what this brand is. So prime example, this line could be negative, so this is pushing it and then this is pulling it back in. And again, I'm just telling stories by looking at the image. And that's what, when you become a, like, you make a really good brand, you're able to do this just by looking at it. You be able to pick out the colors or pick out a shape and tell a story or tell a different fragmentation of that logo. So that way people can be like, ah, I see it. Oh, I didn't see it that way. I see it this way. And it becomes a conversation piece and you're communicating and they're talking. But if nothing else, when they leave that conversation with you, that brand is going to be burned into their head because of the stories that they were able to illustrate and visually see, more so than just seeing a logo. And last but not least is then illustrating the nature of your business, right? It's very crucial to have that effect in there. Hence why I have the functionality of the RSS feed. If nothing else, if someone sees the RSS feed, that they know that this thing is doing something with pushing and pulling. It's either pulling content or it's delivering content. And then I get to go into the story. And then I get to say Wiz publication or, wizard publication or whatever variables that I'm talking to that person to define these two keywords of Wiz and pub, and the RSS feed and publication and readers and podcasters all into a publishing powerhouse. And that ends up being the tagline that I use for this: simple, clean, and to the point. And then also the definition of it came from playing with these words and updating and outlining and fragmenting them together to where now this brand essentially is ready to go. At this point in time, now I can say this brand is complete, this logo is done, and then I can take it to the next phase. Any questions?
That's awesome. So good. Now my mind's turning though.
But I was trying to tell you, you probably wanted to wait until I did this so that way, because you had
Mm-hmm.
half, you had half the equation.
Right, right. Yeah, now I just want to dive in deeper, of course, head first.
So is this an actual company that hired you to do this?
No, this one is actually one of mine. So it's because I'm gonna getting into the software side of things, software development. So I went through all the processes to figure out like what is a brand that kind of has a Boss Uncaged feel, but not exactly Boss Uncaged, that can be a partner brand with it. And then all our software that we're gonna develop will be underneath this brand.
And how long from start until this? How long did it take you?
For me personally, doing this, it probably took me 3 days. Usually with clients, it'll probably take more like 4 weeks, because again, I think Jen could attest to it. Like they come in with the mindset, okay, I got this idea, and then we go through these processes, and then the light bulbs start going off, and then what their vision was kind of changes. So the first couple of weeks is just kind of gathering the information and formalizing the visuals, at least roughly on a sketch. And then once they kind of give me the thumbs up, then we can actually have this illustration done in less than a week. And then it'll be probably tweaks and adaptations. And then we'll go into the final week with the final deliverable of, and that's another thing I could talk about, like the vector files, the PNGs, creating guidelines and all the other stuff that go along with that.
When you say it took you 3 days, is that 8 hours a day or 1 hour a day?
For this,
Yeah, I'm just curious.
for myself, for this, maybe total time, 4 hours, something like that. It's funny because when I created it, it was actually an Instagram. Like I do this randomly. Like I have a bunch of these different things on Instagram that I create or on Facebook. And I just, that's how I document like when did it came out. So this came out, just looking at the dates. So 38 weeks ago is when I first came up with this concept. And then this was like less than a day later, this was created. So this was March 2nd, and this was February 27th. So between those fewer 5 days, I mean, from start to finish, probably an hour per day, if that.
And that's because you didn't have to check with anybody. You just checked with yourself. But when
Correct.
you're, say,
Correct.
let's Jen hired you to create a logo, the back and forth and the fact that we all have other things we're looking at the same time. I'm just curious because again, I don't deal with logo creation usually unless people say, well, this look good embroidered. Will this look good on a pen?
We could go a lot faster if I knew exactly, like, you know, I'm putting on the brakes here and there, like, ooh, do I want that color? And I'm going into my thought process and then things are shifting. But if I had everything all lined out, it'd be done.
Right.
Already.
And I think you're the average consumer. I think that you are just absolutely normal and natural. When people are creating things, there's an emotion involved where the creator, like the essay, has no emotion. He's just doing the facts. So that's why for him to make his own logo is pretty quick. He doesn't have to check in. But with you, and I was using you, I could use Kim too as an example. There's a lot of back and forth. I'm curious more from the, how do you charge for that? And how are you able to justify the costs? Because again, I don't know that the average consumer understands how much time goes into what is created. And for me, this is a beautiful logo. It fits right with your branding. It's got that purple, which I always want to see with your branding. I love the name. I mean, I love everything about it. And I'm fascinated that it was so fast for you because again, if Kim was involved or Jen was involved or anybody else, it would take so much longer because of checking in with feelings and asking other people's opinions. So financially, what does this look like?
So I usually say my starting point for like logos is 500. Again, I try to keep it cost effective. And what I do with that is then we'll create 3 versions, right? So again, for me, I don't have to create 3 versions. I created 1. But for Kim, like her project was a lot faster than Jen because she already had a brand that we didn't have to really go through the renaming process. We just really dove into like the iconography side of things, like what visually represents you as a brand. So I would give 3 representations of this new illustration or concept. And what me and Kim did is we went online, we did exactly what we're talking about in this document. We went to Google, we searched, and we went to Vecteezy and we looked for icons together. And then we kind of picked the ones that we like. So we ended up with like maybe 6 or 7, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim. And then we were like, okay, these are cool. And then the next part was, okay, Kim, I need you to look at these fonts. Let me know which fonts you like. So then what I think maybe 2-3 days later, Kim came back, was like, okay, I like these 2 or 3 icons and I like these 4 or 5 fonts. And then what we did is like we took those concepts together, much like we did with this one, and we created that content. And then we said, here's 4 delivered ideas that are more refined, because visually you're not going to be able to see them until they look something like what's on my screen right now, like versus the sketches. Like the sketches are okay. You can kind of see the sketch here versus the finished product. They're very alike, but again, visually seeing rough versus polished is 2 different things. And then shortly thereafter that, I think maybe you took 3 days, Kim, and she was like, okay, I really like this one. And then she was like, just change this color, maybe do this. And we took us like a day to do that. And then that logo was pretty much done at that point.
Mm-hmm. What about the only thing that when I learned all this stuff from you, I'm like, oh gosh, maybe now I need to go back and search about my colors.
Well, your colors are perfect. So I mean, again, that's another thing. Like
you didn't bring all that up, so
yeah. Because again, you already had colors established. So like Kim versus like Jen is 2 different brands, like a brand new brand, brand new naming, versus Kim had a brand and she really had colors, but her icon was not representing who she was. Like your oranges, your purples, your teals, and your blues, phenomenal color palette already. So we didn't really have to, and visually for me, I could just look at the color palette, and what I saw was, okay, she has a triad color system, she has a complementary color system. Okay, that color system worked. Now, if you had 5 different types of purple and a yellow, I'd have been like, let's talk about the colors a little bit. But I didn't have to bring it up because your colors were already established and they were good colors.
Okay.
The other thing is, like, we taking my old brand and like totally putting it as an umbrella, and in the process we're taking 2 pieces of my business that can operate separately and integrating them together. So we're really good. We've melded and integrated things together in this really cool way, but it's taken me on this amazing quest of what I want to present out there and to simplify everything that I'm doing at the same time. Instead of talking to 2 different crowds, I'm integrating them together.
Kim, if you don't mind, can I bring up your logo?
Oh yeah.
All right, 1 second. Bring yours up. think I sent you a brand doc, right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so here it is. I'm about to bring it over now. Gotta snap it in. So this is Kim's final logo. What it ended up being versus where she was before. And I'll bring up the intuitive. And should already be there. Yours is the intuitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just bringing this up so you can kind of see the before and after. So this is her original logo. Now, we didn't exactly use these colors because, again, her color palette was not represented on her website. Her color palette, I found out afterwards when we were working together, and she gave me a list of those colors, the orange and the blues, and obviously they work 10 times better than what's on here right now. So we went from this intuitive bookkeeper script font to, where does it go, to this one. Let me go ahead and hit finish so you can kind of render it and see it. So you can obviously see there's a complete difference in structure, but visually it looks like Kim. It represents Kim, it represents Kim's audience, and then all her colors are in there as well too. So at any given time, she could sample out these colors and use these colors for other elements. And this document is what I was talking about as far as a brand guide. And that's something else that I could probably do another education spot on. But then this allows her to have access to the branding, access to her colors, access to her fonts. Everything is linear in this document. So moving forward, only thing she has to do is literally come, copy the color, drop it in, download her black and white, her white or her color version, and everything is in this one document for her. Her spacing, what to do, what not to do, literally is all outlined for her. Does that make sense? Any additional questions?
I just love it.
I do love your logo. She pretty.
It brought the fun in for Kim, which I didn't see in the other one. Even just bringing in the bright colors, it brings in her personality and that vibrant.
Mm-hmm. This one is called a makeshift. When you're first starting, and then the other one is the true
Yeah.
where we want to go. So yeah,
It's hard when you first start a business to put the money into a logo when you don't even know where you're going to end up. It's what's come first, the chicken or the egg. And while I'm sad you didn't have this logo from the moment you started your business, it brings me
Right.
such joy to know that you have it now. And I hope that you let us all know when you rebrand your website, because I think
I
that's
will.
it's
I'm working on that now. So with essay. So
congratulations to both of you. This is just lovely.
The last thing about this one is it's kind of like with the other one, there's a lot of like the Easter eggs. I just love to put the Easter eggs in here so that when somebody looks at it, they may see something differently than someone else. Like obviously you can see the light bulb, then the filaments inside the light bulb, or you can see the tree, right? And there's also like a question bubble as well, like a speech bubble. So it's like these different elements that you kind of put together, but if they will stand apart, if you could separate the speech bubble, you will see it clear as day. If you put the tree, you will see it clear as day. If you put the bulb, you see it clear as day. But trying to figure out how do we combine all these different elements and make them simplistic so they're not overwhelming, but still become a very clear brand. Because I can see this totally on a hat or a t-shirt or a hoodie as well.
Definitely beautiful.
and we also wanted to create something that could also expand because I am possibly going to go into cannabis bookkeeping and accounting. And so, SA was like, well, we could put the leaf right in the middle. And so it's got even potential down the road. So that's, another thing we were looking at.
Yep. You always got to think ahead and visualize And so this gives you opportunity to, you can put whatever you want in the middle of this. And to your case, we can definitely put a marijuana leaf in there. And if we want to, then we can shift the colors as well. So now that you have the established brand, now you get to play with like the co-branding aspect of it.
Gotcha.
Yep. Cool. That's all I got, guys. Unless you got any other questions.
No, that's good.
That's great.
I've got all kinds of questions, but they're all brand specific to what we're doing. Like just picking the colors, I'm like, oh my gosh. This is kind of what I'm thinking for the fire, like how it changes into the fire. So that would be your red, orange, right? Yellow.
Yeah. So that'll be, let's say, red. I'm gonna make it really bright red. Your brilliant red. So if it was a triad, like this is close to that
Not
orange.
your screen anymore.
Oh, sorry. Let me share. So, obviously we can shift this one to make this one more orange, but again, we're talking about you want it warm and cool, right? We're talking about a red logo and a blue logo, like a red flame and a blue flame. So you already have your two blues, you have your red and your orange, and then you have a secondary accent color of yellow that kind of goes into your fire as well. So like this color palette, like what we just did is literally what I do behind the scenes on all my logos is kind of figuring out the colors. And then I would say this is the color palette that you probably want to go with.
Mm. Wonder if it was jewel tones. How does that change it?
You talk about like ruby?
Yeah, like if it goes to, I'm just curious what would, because I'm also trying to bring people into like financial limitless, right? Limitless financial wealth. But then there's spiritual and sacred wealth. So that ruby color, the bright red feels fierce and the darker red feels rich.
With this palette.
I'd love your feedback too, Hildy and Kim, because Kim actually knows me and has experienced me in some ways through teaching.
Trying to shift it around.
I'm also like that sassy, rebellious. You guys didn't know that, did you?
Jen, when you envision yourself, are you envisioning yourself more like the fabric that you lifted up?
Well, this brings me that feeling of fire. This was actually created for me for fan thing that looks like fire when it moves. So I just happened to have it here. So what he's creating is flames for me, and we're balancing the masculine and feminine with these two flames.
Got
And
it.
what I started playing with is the idea of bringing the chakra colors into two of the flames, because they actually could blend in, because the bottom chakras would be red, orange, and then yellow. So it kind of works. And then the top ones go into that green, blue, and purple. But I'm trying to figure out, because we are taking two of my brands and putting them together to give this unity of masculine, feminine balance.
Are you thinking your red, orange, and yellow should be the brighter of each color? Like really bright stand out and the blues be more subtle?
I don't know. That's where I'm getting caught, because I love jewel tones, like jewel tones, but then I want to make sure that everything stands out and has the image that we're trying to grab with the right people.
Essay, if you start by grabbing the brightest orange, how does that translate the palette?
It still has the two blues, still has the crimson red that's more of a richer orange, and it shifted the yellow to more of a
Lime.
yeah. But keep in mind, like, we don't have to use all 5 colors, right? So this is just showing you like triad wise what it would look like, but we could always shift this in more to the yellow a little bit if we need to. But I would
Yeah.
the red and the only problem that I see is that the red and the orange, if we were to convert these to grayscale,
Mm-hmm.
they're the same value.
I got you. Well, see, the orange to me looks like salmon.
Same.
Yeah.
I don't see a bright orange. No. Yeah, go in that one and go no. Go the other way.
Like
Go closer to red.
Yeah, that's where we were before. That's where it gets a little muddy.
Keep going.
like when it goes bright red versus ruby, it changes it so much, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if you're looking at them from grayscale value, like they're very similar in grayscale, and that's where the
Mhm.
issue is.
I mean, like I don't want things to be rough on the eyes when they're on my website and stuff too, you
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah,
I just wanted to see what happens when we find a bright orange, but we haven't found one yet.
so you could always sample it in. And that's the other thing about we could upload that image, right? So if I wanted to extract the colors, I'm just going to upload something random. Let me just pick this P, for example. And then it'll select all the colors it can find. So if one of these oranges would work for you, for
Nope.
example, let's just say if that did work, if it did, right? Or I can go to a brighter palette. Or I can go to a muted palette. So all they're doing is shifting the colors to figure out which colors we would want to select. So let's say if this was the orange we wanted to go with, then I can easily copy this and then go back to the color wheel, and then it automatically shifts those colors over.
Jen, in your mind, do you see the orange and the red being very similar in color?
well, in the flame, I'm seeing it more like where it's merging, like you would look in a fire flame, right? So it kind of blends into it.
So you're thinking you have to understand like the way color works. You're thinking more like a gradient. And the last
Yeah,
thing,
like a gradient where it's all kind of just mixing in together. Yeah, like airbrushed almost.
but in logos you don't want to do gradients. So you want to keep it very like block colors. You could do overlap colors, but you just keep in mind that getting the gradients is when you're gonna start like this logo, for example.
The
I could
primary colors, basically. Boom,
yeah.
boom. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you want to be bold and you want to be sharp, but you also want to make sure it works in black and white, right? So gradients in black and white, you kind of lose a little edge to it as well. So in your case, you want to look at it as overlapping colors. Like this one, I have this purple underneath the green. You could have the orange on top of the red, and the flame does not have to be like a literal flame. It can be more of a vector frame or more of like think sporting games, right? You don't usually see gradients like that. You usually see overlapping colors, and they may have some shadows to separate them a little bit.
Okay.
But the last thing you want to do is you don't want to create an illustration for a logo. You don't want to like put all these details like a mountain, right? If I did a mountain as an illustration, I have to draw all these lines and all this work, and then I look at it from a distance. When I shrink it down, it's not going to look like a mountain. It's going to look like a blob. That's why usually mountains is usually like a line, and a line is usually just a triangle. But from a distance, it looks like the icon of it, the psychology of it. Then you translate and say, okay, that's a mountain because of whatever things are going around it. But it doesn't have to have all the details in it. Less is more when it comes down to the icons. Think of like Nike, for example. Think about Amazon, Facebook. Think about all the brands that you know. Think about how simple they are.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm gonna hit stop recording unless anybody has any other last questions on this topic.
Nope, that's good.
Cool. All right.